This picture went around the world after the completion of the campaign in France in 1940. It was taken on Thursday, May 16th, and shows Adolf Hitler surrounded by 12 officers, whom he is honoring for the capture of the strongest Belgian border fort in the Liège fortress ring, namely Eben-Emael, and several key bridges for the German advance between the 10th and the 15th. In May, he had awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. As you can see, some of the officers are wearing the Iron Cross First Class or Second Class on their field tunics, while others are not. The reason for this was that possessing these two decorations was a prerequisite for being awarded the Knight's Cross. Therefore, the soldiers who did not yet possess the Iron Cross Second Class or First Class were awarded them on the 12th and 13th. In May, the missing classes were awarded, followed by the awards ceremony captured in the picture at the Führer headquarters Felsenest in Bad Münster, Eifelrodert in the Eifel, to be able to receive the Knight's Cross. All the newly decorated recipients had been members of the Luftwaffe Assault Detachment Koch, under Captain Walter Koch, which had been tasked with capturing Fort Eben-Emael. This so-called assault detachment was on the 2nd. On November 2nd, 1939, it was formed in Hildesheim under the cover name Experimental Detachment Friedrichshafen, and shortly thereafter renamed Assault Detachment Koch. However, 3 others associated with the Eben-Emael operation who received the Knight's Cross are missing from the picture. Decorated members of Assault Detachment Koch. They were Sergeant Helmut Arpke, Lieutenant Martin Schechter, and Lieutenant Gerhard Schacht. The absence of the last named is particularly regrettable, because Gerhard Schacht, a legendary figure in the airborne forces of the Second World War, had the most exciting career of all during and after the war. Therefore, I will also remember him in detail at the end. I will dedicate it to him, with details that you may not find anywhere else. However, anyone now expecting a battle report about the operation will be disappointed, because there are already so many detailed reports, videos, books, and articles about it that a report from me would not contain any new information. I just want to mention that during the Eben-Emael operation at the beginning of the Western Campaign, on the 10th, May 1940, out of the 493 German soldiers deployed in the 4 assault groups: granite, iron, concrete, and steel, 43 were killed and 99 wounded. The Belgians had 60 killed and 40 wounded. Here, Belgian soldiers are taken into German captivity. No, on the contrary, I find it much more interesting to look at the later lives of the 15 officers who were awarded the Knight's Cross after Eben-Emael. Because these young men belonged to an elite unit that continued to suffer heavy losses throughout the next 5 years of war. Let's start with the officer standing on the far left in the bottom row. This was Lieutenant Egon Delika, who served as the deputy leader of the assault group Granite during the airborne operation that directly targeted the plateau of Fort Eben-Emael. Granite had 6 killed and 20 wounded. Egon Delika was born on January 4, 1915, in Stettin, Pomerania, and on the 1st April 1933. He joined the 2nd Battery of the Artillery Regiment, 2 in Schwerin, as a gunner. After he was transferred to the Air Force on May 1, 1935, he was on the 1st. On June 1, 1936, he joined Bomber Wing 152 Hindenburg in Neubrandenburg, Mecklenburg, where Delika was on the 1st. In April 1937, he was promoted to Unterbezieher, and on April 1, 1938, to Unterfeldwebel. After completing his training as an observer, which ended on April 1, 1939, Delika was, on the 28th December 1939, promoted to lieutenant and assigned to the 2nd Group of Training Wing 1 under Major Karl Edward Wilke. For the Eben-Emael operation, he was transferred to Assault Detachment Koch in April, and, after the successful conclusion on the 12th, he was awarded the Knight's Cross in May 1940. 4 days later, he was promoted to First Lieutenant. From October 1940 to July 1941, Delika was the captain of the 6th Squadron of Training Wing 1, with which he also took part in the airborne operation to capture the Greek Mediterranean island of Crete, Operation Mercury. During the Eastern Campaign, which began in 1941, he was wounded in April 1942. After his recovery, he was promoted to captain on July 1, 1942, and then, until May 1943, he led the 2nd Group of Airborne Wing 2. On November 21, 1943, he was awarded the Paratrooper badge. On December 26, he received the German Cross in gold. In the fall of 1944, Captain Egon Delika became the commander of the 2nd Battalion of the 19th Paratrooper Regiment, with which he was deployed on the Western Front. On the 1st February 1945, according to another source on the 12th Theatre, Saint-Tours, he was taken prisoner of war by the British during the battle in the Reichswald near Kleve, from which he was released after almost 2.5 years, on the 27th August 1947. 7 years later, on May 1, 1956, he was taken on by the newly established West German Air Force as a squadron leader and logistics officer in the Uetersen Air Base Group and was promoted to captain on September 22, on the 1st. On February 1, 1957, he became squadron commander and ground service officer in the Air Base Group of the Air Force Weapons School 50 in Fürstenfeldbruck. Then, from the 1st February 1958, he was assigned to Military District Command 6 in Munich, in the S-1 Personnel Section. On September 20, 1960, he was promoted to Major, and on November 8, 1966, to Lieutenant Colonel, with the awarding of the Federal Cross of Merit on ribbon on the 31st. On March 31, 1971, Lieutenant Colonel Egon Delika retired. He passed away on the 26th. April 1999 in Pullach, near Munich. In the picture next to him stood the leader of the operation, the commander of the Koch Assault Detachment, Captain Walter Koch. He was born on September 10, 1910 in Bonn, and at the age of 19 on the 3rd April 1929. He joined the Prussian Protective Police in Berlin as an officer cadet. After his promotion to lieutenant, Koch joined a police unit established by order of the new Prussian Minister of the Interior, Hermann Göring, to protect the Reich government, which, after its commander, Lieutenant Colonel of the Protective Police, Walter Wecke, was known as the Wecke Detachment for Special Purposes, or was referred to as the Göring Staff Guard. Here you can see the Prussian Minister of the Interior, Hermann Göring, in 1935, with his newlywed wife, Emmy Sonnemann. After the Staff Guard had grown into a regiment with 6 battalions, it was transferred to the Air Force in 1935 by Hermann Göring as the Regiment General Göring. Here, Walter Koch was promoted to captain on April 20, 1938. After he, pictured on the far left, had successfully led the Eben-Emael operati on May 10, 1940, he was on the 10th, awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. Shortly afterwards, he was promoted to major and took command of the 1st Battalion in the Airborne Assault Regiment, Aridu. His battalion was part of the first wave during the Battle of Crete on May 20, 1941. The target of Koch's 53 transport gliders had been the village of Malem, which was defended by New Zealanders. But hardly had Koch landed when he suffered a severe head injury in close combat at Hill 107 and had to be taken to a field hospital in Greece. After months of recovery, he took command of his battalion again, which had then been transferred to the Eastern Front. Here, in March, he was awarded the German Cross in gold. From February 19, 1942 to March 11, 1943, he commanded the Jaeger Regiment Hermann Göring. Then, promoted to lieutenant colonel on April 20, he first took over as acting commander, starting from the 1st. April 1943 as commander of the Paratrooper Regiment, 5, which from the 10th November had been transferred to Tunisia to be deployed against the Allied landing in Algeria that took place on November 7th. There, his unit had captured a number of British paratroopers during the fighting near Dieppe. Here you can see him interrogating them and then handing these prisoners over to an army unit. But when he learned about the so-called commando order issued by Hitler on October 18, 1942, which ordered the immediate execution of sabotage teams, or commandos, he spoke out sharply against it and ensured the proper transfer of the captured British soldiers. This commando order was a clear violation of the Hague Regulations and the 1929 Geneva Convention on the treatment of prisoners of war. Was the German response to discovered English instructions, which recommended allowing German prisoners of war to survive only to a reasonable extent. Another reason was an incident that occurred during the British commando Operation Basalt, which was carried out to capture prisoners, led by Major Geoffrey George, on the night of the 3rd to the 4th October 1942 on the Channel Island of Sark, which was occupied by around 300 German soldiers. While they were searching for the German garrison, the 40-year-old resident of the island, Francis Noel Pittard, gave the commandos precise details about the Germans' accommodations. As a result, the commando Anders Lassen, a Dane, killed the unsuspecting sentry in front of the quarters, which housed 5 sleeping soldiers from an engineer unit, with his combat knife. Then the 5 German soldiers were initially handcuffed, and 4 of them were killed during the British retreat. On their retreat to England, the commandos took the engineer corporal Hermann Weinreich with them, where he was taken to the notorious London Cage, the so-called London Cage, the British interrogation centre under Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Scotland, where everything was extracted from the prisoners through torture, whipping, mock executions, beatings, sleep, and food deprivation. In a trial brought against the torturers in London in 1948, all those involved were acquitted. Lieutenant Colonel Walter Koch, who had led the Paratrooper Regiment 5 until April 21, 1943, had returned to Germany for treatment and recovery from a wound, where in August 1943 he was assigned to the staff of the Luftwaffe's General Luftzeugmeister. There he suffered severe injuries in a car accident, and on the 27th October 1943, at the age of 33, he died in Berlin. He was buried at the Nordfriedhof Cemetery in his hometown of Bonn. However, soon after, a rumor spread in his regiment that Koch had been killed in a staged accident by the Security Service, SD, because of his harsh criticism of Hitler's so-called commando order. However, this is more than doubtful, since open criticism and rejection of the commando order had also been expressed within the high command of the Wehrmacht. For example, by the head of German military intelligence, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, who was the direct superior of the German commando unit Brandenburg, which also operated in so-called half or full disguise, for example, either with an enemy's overcoat thrown over or in complete enemy uniform, had been deployed since the beginning of the war. Later, after the SS under Otto Skorzeny had taken over the commando operations in 1944, the Germans captured in U.S. uniforms during their Operation Greif in the Ardennes offensive were shot as spies by the U.S. forces, in accordance with the German so-called commando order. However, it can also be stated that on the German side, the order was carried out only to a very limited extent, especially since Point 5 of the order gave the frontline troops options to circumvent the order, which was in violation of the Geneva Convention. This order does not apply to the treatment of those enemy soldiers who are captured or surrendered during normal combat operations, major offensives, large-scale landing operations, or large airborne operations in open combat. This order also does not apply to those who fall into our hands after naval battles, or to enemy soldiers who try to save their lives by parachuting after air battles. To the right of the grim-looking German Reich Chancellor in a brown uniform stood Reserve Lieutenant Joachim Meissner, the deputy leader of Assault Group Iron, which was tasked with capturing the Belgian Albert Canal Bridge at Kana. Their losses, out of a deployment strength of 115 men, amounted to 22 killed, 26 wounded, and 1 missing. Meissner had to replace the wounded leader of Group Eisen shortly after the operation began. He was born on October 15, 1911 in the Lower Silesian Free State, and on the 1st, he joined the Reichswehr on October 1, 1929. On March 31, 1934, he left to take up the position of advisor in the Foreign Department of the Reichssports leader Hans von Chammer und Osten. On August 26, 1939, shortly before the outbreak of the Second World War on September 1, Meissner was serving as a reserve sergeant in Pioneer Battalion 8 in Upper Silesian, Neisse, had been drafted, but then he transferred to the Air Force. On January 1, 1940, he was transferred to the 1st Company of Parachute Regiment, one which on the 1st March 1940 was subordinated to the Koch Assault Detachment. Meissner was appointed as a reserve lieutenant on March 20, 1940. After the capture of Fort Eben-Emael, Meissner received on the 12th Farbis, on May 12th, he received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, and 1 day later, his appointment as a reserve first lieutenant. In August 1940, he was transferred to Parachute Regiment 2, with which he first took part in Operation Mercury in Crete, and later in the fighting near Leningrad in the east. From December 6, 1941 to June 10, 1942, Meissner was an adjutant in Parachute Regiment 2. Then, after his promotion to captain of the reserve on the 30th September 1942, he was deployed in North Africa in the Ramka Paratrooper Brigade. At the beginning of 1943, he was assigned to the staff of the 11th Air Corps starting from the 1st. In April, as the commander of the 6th Company in the 2nd Paratrooper Regiment. His last assignment, since April 16, 1944, was as the battalion commander of the 3rd Battalion of the 14th Paratrooper Regiment in the 5th Paratrooper Division, which, after the Allied landing in Normandy, was deployed in the heavy defensive battles in the city of Saint-Lô in Normandy, which was 95% destroyed by the U.S. Air Force during the battle. On July 25, 1944, west of Saint-Lô, Captain Joachim Meissner was killed in action at the age of 33. He rests with another 11,168 German soldiers who fell on the invasion front at the German military cemetery in Marigny. To the right of Meissner stood First Lieutenant Gustav Altmann, the leader of the Assault Group Steel. He had been tasked with capturing the bridge near Zelt. His group, consisting of 116 men, had 8 killed in action, as well as 16 seriously and 16 lightly wounded. Gustav Altmann was born on April 13, 1912 in Brits-Brandenburg in the Angermunde district. On April 9, 1931, he joined the police as a police cadet and was trained at the police academy in Kiel. On October 1, 1935, Altmann joined the General Göring Regiment as a senior sergeant and completed his officer training in September 1937 with a promotion to lieutenant. In the Göring Regiment, Altmann initially served as company commander of the 11th. He was assigned to the 11th Company, and with his promotion to first lieutenant in September 1939, he became the commander of the 1st Company of the 1st Paratrooper Regiment on the 1st. On March 1, 1940, he was transferred to the Koch Assault Detachment, and, after capturing the strategically important bridge at Feldwitzelt for the German advance on May 12, he was awarded the Knight's Cross. On May 16th, he was appointed captain and commander of the 2nd Company of the Paratrooper Assault Regiment. In 1941, during Operation Mercury in Crete, when his company alone suffered a loss of 108 soldiers, Altmann was on May 22. On May 22, he was taken prisoner of war by the British on the Akrotiri Peninsula in Crete, where he remained until the end of the war. During his captivity, he was promoted to major on August 24, 1942. On February 20, 1981, Major, retired, Gustav Altmann passed away in Reinhardshagen, Kassel District, at the age of 69. In the back row, far left, stood Pioneer Lieutenant Rudolf Witzig, the leader of the assault group Granite, which had been tasked with the direct capture of the fort just mentioned. In the process, out of the 85 men who landed with gliders, 6 were killed and 20 were wounded. Rudolf Witzig was born on August 14, 1916 in Röhringhausen, Westphalia, Röhrlinghausen, Kreis Wanne-Eickel. He joined on the 1st of the month after graduating high school. On April 1, 1935, he joined Pioneer Battalion 16 in Höxter as an officer cadet and ensign, and on the 20th Von Tour. On April 20, 1937, he was promoted to lieutenant, and in August was assigned as platoon leader in Pioneer Battalion 31, which was also stationed in Höxter. A year later, on August 1, 1938, Lieutenant Witzig had himself transferred to the Paratrooper Infantry Battalion under Major Richard Heydrich in Stendal, where he led the Pioneer Platoon, and from the 1st of September 1939, he took part in the Polish campaign. In the meantime, having been promoted to first lieutenant, he was then assigned with his Pioneer Platoon to the Assault Detachment Koch in Friedrichshafen. After Eben-Emael on May 10, 1940, he was awarded the Knight's Cross and promoted to captain. On May 20, he became adjutant to the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force, Hermann Göring, until August 1940, and then served as Chief of the 9th Seatraites Company of the 1st Airborne Assault Regiment, which he also led in May 1941 during Operation Mercury in Crete. During this, Witzig was so badly wounded in the leg that his recovery took almost a year. From May 10, 1942 now, as commander of the Engineer Battalion of the 11th Air Corps, he took part in the fighting in Tunisia and was promoted to major on September 1. From June 1943, Witzig was commander of the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Engineer Regiment 21, and on the 17th. On October 17, he was awarded the German Cross in Gold, and from November, he was commander of the Parachute Engineer Regiment of the 11th Air Corps. In June 1944, he was appointed commander of the Parachute Engineer Regiment 21, which was transferred to Lithuania in July 1944, and took part in the defense of the Duna-Dunerberg-Kovno Road. In October, the decimated regiment was transferred back to Germany for replenishment. Major Witzig then took command in Holland in the 6th Paratrooper Division of the Paratrooper Regiment, 18. On November 25, 1944, he was awarded the Oak Leaves to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. With his regiment, which was awarded the cross in February and March, he had taken part in the battle in the Reichswald near Kleve on the Lower Rhine, fighting heavy battles against superior British and Canadian troops, against Major Witzig on the 8th. In May 1945, he was taken prisoner and remained in captivity until September. After the war, While he was living in the British zone near Hamburg, he learned that the French wanted to kidnap him and convict him as an alleged war criminal, which, however, had not been prevented by the British commander. However, and this shows the strangeness of the years that followed, Witzig was convicted by a French court in absentia, and from then on avoided the French zone like the devil avoids holy water. The time was strange because the bearer of the oak leaves to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross since the 16th. Since January 16, 1956, he was an officer in the Bundeswehr, among other things, commander of the 7th Engineer Battalion in Holzminden, and later, as a colonel, commander of the Army Engineer School. On September 30, 1974, Witzig retired. The former Bundeswehr colonel, Rudolf Witzig, who was mentioned in the Wehrmacht report and highly decorated with the Wehrmacht Honor Roll clasp, and who was for many years the first chairman of the German Paratroopers Association, is at the German who passed away in Oberschleißheim in 2001. The next officer to the right of Rudolf Witzig was Reserve First Lieutenant Otto Zierach, who served as the S3 responsible for planning and leadership in Assault Detachment Koch. During the Eben-Emael operation, he was assigned to the largest group, Beton, where he served as Koch's representative with the paratroopers at the fiercely contested bridge near Vroenhoven. Otto Zierach was there on the 26th. Born on January 26, 1907 in Eberswalde, near Berlin, and on the 13th. Entered the police academy in Brandenburg, and der Havel on April 13, 1928. From April 1929 to April 1934, he was in Battalion Wecke, then from October in Regiment General Göring. In April 1938, he was transferred as a von Junker Oberfeldwebel to the 1st Battalion of the 1st Parachute Regiment, from which 2 years later, since the First OI. February 1940, promoted to Reserve First Lieutenant, he was transferred to Koch's assault unit during that month. For his service at Eben-Emael, he had on the 15th May 1940 received the Knight's Cross, here, marked with a green cross, in conversation with Propaganda Minister Dr. Joseph Goebbels and the Chief of Staff of the SA, Victor Lutze. The officer standing to his left, marked with a red cross, is the already mentioned Reserve First Lieutenant, Joachim Meissner, Deputy Leader of Group Eisen. On May 20, 1940, Zierach was promoted to Reserve Captain and on the 1st. In July, he was appointed commander of Parachute School 1 in Stendal in the Altmark region of Saxony-Anhalt. When Operation Mercury in Crete was imminent in May 1941, Zierach was reassigned as a special duty officer to the staff of Airborne Assault Regiment ARP, and he was part of the first wave with the objective of attacking Maleme. Here is the parade of the paratroopers after their hard-fought and bloody victory. On the 14th. On March 14, 1941, he was appointed as an active captain among the war officers, so-called wartime officers, meaning officers commissioned from the enlisted or non-commissioned ranks under eased wartime conditions. On the 1st. On September 1, 1942, Zierach was promoted to major. On September 28, 1942, he became the commander of the 3rd Battalion of the Luftwaffe Field Division, I under Colonel Gustav Wilke, here with Reichsmarschall Göring on the 25th. July 1943 on the Eastern Front, near Novgorod, where he had transferred the division in November 1942 and had taken part in the battles of Demyansk. At the beginning of November 1943, it was taken over by the Army as the 1st Field Division, where, during the Soviet Leningrad-Novgorod operation, it was destroyed in the Novgorod area in January 1944. On January 8, 1944 until April, Zierach was assigned to the Air War Academy in Berlin-Gatow. A year later, on October 15th. In February 1945, he became the IB, the head of the quartermaster department of the 2nd. He was appointed to the Parachute Corps, where he was taken prisoner of war by the British, either in April or early May 1945, in the Breckendorf area in Schleswig-Holstein, from which he was released at the end of 1945. Major Ade Otto Zierach died on the 12th. He passed away on August 12, 1976, at the age of 69, in Nakrot-Vezerda in the Sauerland region. That was the first part, with the biographies of the officers who were awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross after the capture of the Belgian fort Eben-Emael. The introduction of the other protagonists will take place in the second part. But after talking about German paratroopers for quite a while now, I would like to take this opportunity to point out my major paratrooper novel, Geheimkommando Nikolaus, which tells the story of paratroopers from the 1st Parachute Panzer Division, who were given the responsibility by the fate of war for 25 Anglo-American pilots prisoners of war taken from the Stalag Luft III in Sagan, who were being sought by the Reich Main Security Office for a reason crucial to the war effort. The novel is available on Amazon.